Hi, welcome to the I Am Candex series, the show about community, innovators, entrepreneurs, and the impact they are having in our world, all through a diversity lens. I'm your host, Man Wong, and today we are joined by Dawn Jackson. Dawn is the founder and director of Coach Inclusion and also the co-chair for Inclusion and Belonging for the City Women's Network. May also add a great friend and advisor to the Candex team. Dawn, welcome. We're thrilled to have you today. How are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you. Still adjusting to everything that's going on, trying to stay out of the kids' way, keep a smile and a brave face on my side as best I can. How are you adjusting to the lockdown?
Yeah, good actually. I'm finding myself reinventing myself every day, but that's also very good.
That sounds exciting. What sort of things have you been up to?
Oh, well, all sorts of stuff. So as you rightly said, I've got a lot of coaching going on right now, and I'm coaching a really wide section of interesting people, which is fabulous. People that I wouldn't normally have coached in the past.
Awesome.
And also doing some stuff with the Women's Network. In fact, we have a board meeting in the next couple of days to talk about direction of travel around our events. We've moved a whole lot online, as you can imagine. So it's about making sure that's working. We have traction, we have people interested in attending, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm doing those too and doing some singing as per normal once a week.
Yeah,
which is
brilliant.
keeping me sane, I have to say.
Yeah. Still meditating as well?
Yeah, meditating as well, doing my 15 minutes a day homework, because I now attend a weekly meditation course.
Brilliant.
So it's keeping me straight, it's keeping me level-headed, which is fabulous. So
yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to keep yourself mentally stimulated as well as physically healthy, eating well and all that sort of stuff, which is great. What are you missing throughout lockdown in your life? A favorite restaurant perhaps? Or
yeah, I mean, one of my hobbies, if you can call eating a hobby, was going out.
It's an official hobby.
Yeah, I was going out to restaurants. So obviously living in London, we have pubs down here. And not having them open has been a real challenge. Walking past them rather than sitting inside them is a challenge. But also, I have a house in France as well, so I can't get out to there as often as I would like. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on the news to make sure that at some point opens up, but who knows when that will be.
I think can you travel there if you own a place? I think, or am I wrong in that?
I would love you to be right, but no, you can't. It's a second home basically. So
sure,
you know that's not deemed as essential. I can understand that, but yeah, I mean, in the scheme of things, it's not a big loss, but it's something that was part of my life along with the restaurant eating. So yeah, the sooner both come on back online, the better, really.
Well, fingers crossed for you. Not long to go, and
Yeah.
I guess before we sort of segue into the crux and the core of the conversation, I think on a personal note, I've certainly felt a bit more reflective during this period. Right, I'm appreciating things that I think I would certainly have otherwise been taking for granted. You know, I often say to Trina at the moment, as soon as everything returns back to normal, quote unquote, you know, I definitely want to go see a band as soon as possible. What sort of things have you been, well, I guess more thankful for, a bit more grateful for?
Grateful for the simpler things. Your life takes on a much simpler perspective and slows down. So I've been thankful for the extra reflection space I have. I'm not my most creative at the moment, actually. That's not been the case for some time. So that's the stuff, plus the simple things around nature and appreciating birds, appreciating flowers, all those things which you don't tend to even notice, I guess. You know, pre-COVID, you didn't really notice that to that extent. But now it's a real appreciation of what's going actually on around you.
It's great, isn't it? Some time to take a breath and have a
Maybe.
look. Yeah, and pause for a moment and really sort of consider everything. So let's get started. I'm really excited to have a chat to you about what you're currently up to and how that journey's been for yourself and a little bit of your story, really. I'd love to start with your mission and vision as to what you're doing with your business Coach Inclusion and how that's all sort of come about.
Yeah, so if I start with what actually energizes me and what I recognized over recent times, just where I should be focusing my energy, that's been on ultimately very linked to my values, one of which is fairness. So I suppose that's my key value, if you like. And I'm energized by the desire to make the world a fairer place. And by that, what I mean is where people have the opportunity to succeed and have the opportunity to benefit from things like education and other opportunities. And that should be available freely to everybody. It shouldn't just be preserved or reserved for the few. So with that, if we can get to a space where everybody in their uniqueness, and I use the word uniqueness quite specifically, everybody has their own uniqueness. And if we can get to the point where we can value uniqueness and ensure that people feel a sense of belonging, whether that be in society or whether that be in corporates, for example, then that would give me a sense of real fulfillment, even being part of that journey, if you like.
How did that come about then? So what inspired? I mean, it's something that I feel the same as, it's important to see if we can work together and collaborate and make a fairer world, a fairer workplace, opportunities for all. But what inspired you? Was it people that you met or experiences that you'd seen, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things, and very often I sort of learn from practical scenarios, situations I find myself in. Increasingly over the years, working in corporate, particularly in meeting scenarios, I was finding that the same people were given the opportunity to speak, the same people were given the opportunity to run certain projects, the same people were treated slightly differently, probably unconsciously. And I was always the person that tried to call it out. I was always the person that said, right, hold on a second, she's got a point of view, I think she wants to speak, rather than let's just assume it's the same voices, the same perhaps louder voices that got the attention. So I think a number of those scenarios, they kept repeating themselves. I kept seeing it everywhere. And being somebody that came from a slightly underprivileged background and fighting to progress and have a meaningful role and to actually push myself, I recognised that there's more people like me out there. And we need to start listening, and we need to start giving them a voice. So I think that's where it all spawned from, really, recognising it exists, unconsciously perhaps, but also my own personal circumstances as well.
It's apparent that the more conversations I have and the more of these shows that we do, when you talk about someone's why, it's always down to an experience, isn't it, and what you can see. And moreover, it's those that will take that brave step to go, actually, this is not acceptable for me, and I want to do something about it, and it's within your powers to do so. So did you feel in your time in corporate, or that you could see these problems that existed, this gap, and you wanted to take a step and make some impact on there, but you felt that you couldn't do it in corporate? Because obviously I've said this to you in passing and personally many times, anybody that starts their own business, I think, is tremendously brave, and everyone should be supporting and giving a lot of credit towards that. And you've done so the beginning of this year, smack bang over what we're having now as this pandemic and crisis. So I guess there's a few questions in here. Did you feel it wasn't possible to make that impact and that change within the corporate side, and you had to go it alone? And how has that process been through this period?
I think it's been possible to make change from inside an organisation, and I have done that. But it's the acceleration of that change, I think, and the real laser focus on this agenda. I often found that I was, I suppose, trying to push water uphill a little bit when it came to trying to get people to embrace inclusion fully across an organisation, when so many other distractions were happening. But now I recognise I'm in control of my own business. I can put that laser focus in place and start to think about what I can do. But I think that in itself can cause challenges, because you're only one person in the business, as opposed to the benefit of having, I don't know, many colleagues that you're working alongside that can actually powerhouse the whole agenda. But in answer to your question, I think it depends, and I think there are opportunities internally to make a difference, but it depends on the speed at which you want to run, I guess.
And coaching then in particular, I mean, obviously you could be biased to say yes. It's interesting, isn't it, in the sense that I guess working very closely with people in the work of coaching and mentoring is where you feel that you can get the best impact and make these particular changes that you're trying to advocate and see.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because what I found is a lot of the awareness around inclusion goes to the heart of people's beliefs and values and what motivates them. And often that is a space that's can be a little bit risky and scary for people to talk about in an open setting. Coaching gives you the opportunity in a safe space to perhaps surface some of those things. And that, I think, is where coaching is useful for driving inclusion, because it allows you to talk about those things that might be perhaps not in somebody's sphere of awareness, but you can surface through a good conversation.
Yeah, it's I think you end up breaking down barriers a little bit easier as well, I suppose. As a full disclosure, as someone who's married to someone that's had the benefit of your coaching, that's what she certainly found and remarked upon. Someone objectively helping me break down barriers and understand things and see things in a different perspective rather than so close to you. And it's interesting, I guess, in turn, that means that you have to be very selective with the types of people that you can, with people that you can coach as well. You couldn't potentially coach people that were very close to you or good friends, I suppose, right? Because that objective viewpoint is not there.
There's a strong code of ethics, particularly with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, that I am a member of, which means that we have to be very, very cautious around the whole ethical side of coaching. So where things perhaps go beyond what we're able to support, perhaps moving into things like therapy, then we need to refer that. We're not able or should be attempting to try and sort out issues with people, which is not within our gift or our ability to do. So we have to be careful about who we coach. Having said that, I could almost coach anybody from any sector, within any role, assuming that they are fully functioning, healthy, mentally healthy individuals. Yeah, but because coaching, in terms of approach, is not selective of what type of function you're in. It's available to everybody. It's freely available to everybody, and I think everybody can benefit from it.
That's excellent. Yeah. And have you, out of interest, have you used coaches throughout your career?
Yeah, I have actually. I find it enormously helpful. I've got a coach, I have a supervisor coach, and I have a mentor. So that's a number of people that offer me different perspectives and offer me different, I suppose, pathways, if you like, to consider that come out in those conversations. So I think the support element when you're a coach is extremely important. The supervision is very important.
I think that's
to be
brilliant.
able to share.
Yeah. Do you often find a barrier to getting these services done is are people willing to ask for help and having that vulnerability, or do you think actually it's not that difficult anymore? People are it's quite a common thing. People will seek services of coaches.
Yeah, I think it's a journey. I think the younger generation I'm finding are much more receptive to coaching than perhaps I can remember when I was younger. They're much more open to it, curious and committed to actually, to learn. I think those are sort of parts of an individual that you have to bring to coaching, a sort of commitment and also a curiosity, and to be a beginner, almost learning beginner, because you're constantly learning in life. So I think if you bring those to a coaching conversation, then it's going to be successful. But I think it's when people are told to go on coaching that presents sometimes a problem, particularly if it's like remedial. So that's something to be aware of, particularly in big organizations, around what's the purpose of the coaching, why are you putting somebody on it, and are they fully committed to it? Because that will also impact the effectiveness of it going forward.
Just before we go into a little bit more about your background and your sort of career to date, how does coaching inclusion differ from other coaching services out there? What makes you unique?
That's a fabulous question, and it's something that I need to become even more articulate on.
Sure.
And to have that real, sort of laser type, sharp, crisp definition.
I love your honesty, Dawn.
I'm talking to myself at the moment. I'm reinforcing this message in my head while I'm talking to you. Ultimately, for me, coach inclusion brings one very, very important aspect into coaching, and that is coaching people that wouldn't normally have the opportunity to be coached. They may be people from different levels. They may be junior managers, they may be individuals that are starting out. They could be people from different backgrounds, for people with different ethnicities or different perspectives, who may not ordinarily even be aware of the benefits of coaching. Those are the people that I proactively seek out, if you like, because I think those are the ones that really will benefit from it. And so that's one thing. So it's basically ensuring that people from different backgrounds and different diversities get the opportunity. So that's where the fairness piece comes in. I suppose the other thing is the slant is on what does inclusion look like for leaders, for example. So it's about not only the individual perspective, somebody, as I just described, who wants to perhaps have a greater voice or sense of belonging, but it's about leaders creating that environment to help that happen. You can't have somebody wanting to belong if the environment doesn't lend itself to that. So that's where I'm focusing much more on inclusion as an enabler in that respect, as well as obviously focusing on different people that wouldn't normally benefit from coaching.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a few points in what your answer there. One, from an access point of view, that's brilliant. To take, it sounds like much more about your plan of attack when you were preparing this business, when you launched it earlier this year. It was on that basis, right? So, okay, so in the norm, as I understand coaching and training, you'd be very specific in targets, maybe C-suite or certainly the top of the pyramid. But I think you've been a lot more mindful to go, actually, the ones that probably need the support and attention are those maybe sort of middle management, right. Who, as we often say, are kind of obviously taking all the grunt work from the top, and then they've got to disseminate down to the troops as well. So they've got a very, very precarious role to play into. And it's interesting from an access point of view that these individuals might not necessarily feel that they either warrant it, know about it even, or aware of it. So it's really good to consider it from that access point. And do you feel in this period then that idea has managed to grow and people like ourselves are a bit more reflective and seek the services of yourself? Because talking off air, you're since January it's been growing, right?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I was wanting to say, can I steal the word accessible from you? Because I absolutely love that idea of accessible coaching. I think that's a great statement as well. So I'm going to steal that with pride. So thank you.
I've stolen enough things from you, Dawn, that you've been saying. Don't worry. Half of the website on Candidate X is written by you, I'm sure.
Pro then, that's fine.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say in that answer to your question, I think it is growing, but I think where the gap still exists is where the budget comes from to fund the coach. So ordinarily that funding's available at the, she said, top of the tree, or people not far from the top of the tree, whereas middle management don't often get that focused support and development. They probably get access to a course within perhaps an organisation where coaching elements, but they wouldn't necessarily get coaching. And I think it is growing. And I think when I've worked in previous organisations, I was working for a management development provider, linked to apprenticeship programs in the UK, and often those I coached were middle managers, and they often said, "This is fantastic. This is the jewel in the course. This is where some rubber hits the road, where the learning, actually you reflect on the learning and you then start to think about how you might apply it." So that's the bit that is really, really important about it. So I think it's growing as more organisations recognise the value, but I think there's still an issue with the budgeting behind it and the funding of it. And I often find people are self-funding at the moment at that level because they can't obviously take advantage of the budget within the organisations.
Of course, yeah. But as a small business compared to more established coaching organisations, for instance, that have a larger workforce, you're yourself, and all the decision making is with you. So in that respect, you're a lot more agile. Yeah. And you've been able to navigate this crisis, I guess, quite effectively, because, as I said, your numbers are growing, which is really great to hear. Whereas I think I've heard, hearing on the grapevine, not all coaches are experiencing the same sort of fortune, sadly.
Yeah, I think and I've experienced that as well. I get that viewpoint, but I think going back to your agile, I think it's important in this environment to be adaptable. So, I mean, who knows? I'm taking a direction. It may not work. It might be something that's perhaps short-lived, but you have to keep true to what you believe in and follow that. And if it means tweaking occasionally or redirecting certain things, that's fine. But I think everything I do is tied to my one sort of key value and key driver, which is the whole fairness, equality, and equity piece. So whether that be in this format or something slightly different, it'll always be there as part of anything I do.
Brilliant. Now, just to cast your mind back a little bit, then you've not always been in coaching, and certainly not always in diversity and inclusion as well. You started your career in IT. So how did that metamorphosize into what you're doing today?
So that we're talking now about 100 years ago here.
Don't be silly.
I'm casting my mind back to those first in investment banking, actually, in IT, which absolutely petrified me to say at that time. But to be honest, like many people in my position at that time, and many people now, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after university. So I kind of was interested in London. Okay, so I thought, let's try that. And I almost pushed myself out of my comfort zone and said, okay, let's see whether I am recruitable into the big city. And then that's how I got into IT.
Yeah.
But you have to almost see a segue between skills you have and what you can offer. So I found very quickly that my French speaking skills, because I did French at university, was something that would be valuable in IT, particularly when you're talking to other countries. So I was working on a help desk translating various things with Paris. So that was the common thread that I think benefited both, or I could offer and somebody else could take advantage of. And that's how it started. So I started off in IT and then realised very quickly that IT perhaps was not the right sector for me. And I learned that quickly because I was doing a lot of project management at the time, and realised that the reasons why my projects were not always getting the traction was because of the people element.
Okay.
You have all these wonderful work streams like communication or business deliverables and stuff like that, but the learning, the development, the engagement was missing. So I realised quickly that would be a more satisfying route for me to take, which is why I then moved out of IT into HR.
Wow. And if you can remember how it was back then, what was IT in the city for a young lady at the time?
Oh yeah, back in the day it was challenging. I mean, some organisations didn't even have HR functions.
Right.
And if they were there, they were very transactional. Anything around discrimination or anything that, you felt harassment, bullying, that just wasn't really taken that seriously because, everybody was driving towards the bottom line. And I think things have moved a long way since then, but you have to develop a bit of resilience, a bit of a thick skin, and a coping strategy for that kind of thing at the time, which I did quite well. And never really had a problem in that respect now since, because I guess I'm comfortable in my own skin around that, and I've learned coping strategies from that experience.
Probably didn't recognize it at the time, but it probably gave the initial seeds to what you go on to do, because obviously you moved into HR after that, very centralized into people, and then moved into other roles surrounding diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah, you're probably absolutely right, man. So thanks for that, because that's a real sort of discovery on my part. It probably was. The seeds were sown at that point.
Yeah, through those experiences. And then from the HR role, obviously you anchored yourself into, I think you mentioned to me previously, it was a maternity cover for an insurance company as their diversity and inclusion head.
Yes, that's right. So I had a bit of a long career in talent and learning and leadership for a while. And then I embarked on a bit of engagement work. And then somebody somewhere made me aware of a maternity cover on diversity and inclusion. And I said, okay, I'm not quite sure what that is, but I will have a look anyway. And then I was successful because I brought the engagement angle as well, which is what they wanted. And the D&I stuff would have been a massive learning curve for me, but one I think that fit quite nicely into, what was important to me in a job.
And just for my mind there, how long ago was that first role in D&I? And why I'm asking that is I'm just curious to see from your perspective whether the challenges and solutions that look to engage this challenge of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, has it moved on? Are the challenges slightly different to when you first engaged with it, or do they remain the same?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 5 years ago, so it wasn't that long ago
Mm.
to be exposed to diversity and inclusion. And I still think some of the issues are the same in terms of getting traction, making change happen quickly enough, um, moving the dial, if you like. I think conversations around inclusion and diversity have been going on, I think, since around 1970 with IBM, and they did a lot of work around it to start with. And I think the problem we have is the pace at which change is happening. And what I am finding, though, which is a real positive, is the fact that people now are understanding how D&I links to business priorities. Are better able to articulate that, whereas a few years ago, perhaps that wasn't the case. So the business case for diversity and inclusion is much more solid now, if you like. The business case, the social case, the legal case, all those things are a little bit clearer in people's minds. So we're at kind of an opportunity where we could start to really leverage that and make progress. But at the moment, obviously, you've got the COVID issue, which may well decelerate some of that work.
And have you seen consistent enablers and inhibitors in terms of progress for diversity and inclusion during those 5 years? So it seems, what I'm conscious of is whether the conversation remains the same, and obviously we want to move this dial and show progress and show impact. And whilst there have been, I see many initiatives coming out which seem really solid and so promising. And I guess the cynical part of me sometimes when I'm talking to organizations, because I've acted as a recruiter for 15 years, that I'll meet a manager that tells me this is what I need to tell you that I'm looking for, and then I get an under the table kind of job spec for what they're really looking for, because that's what they know and all that sort of stuff. So and you've got the privy of this insider perspective, whether it is a tick box exercise, which I fear sometimes it may be, or actually, well and truly, there are some very genuine things out there, and there are people fighting this because, in your role 5 years ago, I can't imagine diversity inclusion was such a big market space down there. And we've often talked about it. I think singularly in an organization, you could just end up being a lobbyist trying to garner momentum and interest, right? So I'm just interested from your perspective, do you think that's changed, that idea?
I think it's so dependent on the organisation, to be honest, because different organisations have different levels of maturity towards diversity and inclusion and are on different stages of the journey. So it's difficult always to say has progress been made, because it is down to the culture and the organisation and their levels of maturity around diversity and inclusion. But what I have noticed is a recognition that there's loads of people doing loads of stuff, good stuff with good intent, but it's still not having the desired result. So somewhere we need to start doing something differently to gain traction. But I think also there's a recognition that organisations need to work more closely together to bring about change. You can't attack this agenda from an individual organisational angle. You have to come together to create a societal shift, I think. And I think there's a better appreciation of the fact that this is not always a battle you can fight on your own if you want to achieve big change. And there's so much linked, isn't there, to society's norms and organisations' norms. You've got to look at the wider pool in which you play as an organisation to bring about change. You can't do it all within one organisation on its own, because we're also interlinked.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's so interesting, this collaboration aspect. I look at ERG groups and different setups that support and fly the flag for diverse groups in their individual buckets. But I find that quite siloed. And, maybe it's my idealistic mindset that I feel if actually everybody got on the phone and spoke to each other or did a Zoom call now, rather because they can't meet, whether a great deal more traction could be sort of achieved, really. Because you're right, these problems are sometimes quite systemic, and it does require a lot more work and sharing of ideas to make that change. And perhaps not the conversation to have now, but it'd be very interesting to sort of see how that might sort of work out, and whether you can feature that into the coaching that you do as well with some of the people that you work with. Moving back into the sort of coaching idea, inclusive coaching for me sounds very innovative, very new. I love, as I said, the accessibility aspect of it. What's the marketplace like? Is it pretty embryonic at this stage? Did you find?
Yeah, I mean, there's not many inclusive coaches out there, or if there are different definitions of what that means. So, inclusive coaches in coaching could sometimes be around coaching people with certain disabilities specifically. So making, as you said, coaching accessible to that group of people. But there's less inclusion in coaching, and that could be inclusion in terms of diverse backgrounds being coaches, so diverse individuals being coaches, as well as thinking around inclusion and keeping that front and center when you're coaching. So that kind of stuff is very embryonic in my view, and more needs to be done about it to allow us to, I suppose, support adequately the diverse world we now live in. We have so much diversity. Why is coaching only really offered to or available to or resonating with people that of a certain background? Why not expand that? So I think that's where it's new.
Yeah, right. Removing it just from people that perhaps in positions of privilege or ability to have that, right?
Seniority, yeah.
Yeah, and which is so important. And have you found, I guess, I mean, your earlier point as well, how diversity and inclusion has a wider perspective, some of the initiatives and all that progress maybe slowed down, when we also obviously hope not, during this period. And in turn, have you found your services, when you've been trying to, because obviously you've got to put a business development hat on, which is I'm sure new and exciting for you. Did you find
uncomfortable?
Yeah, someone who's accustomed to bashing the phone for most of my career, it's I know how you feel. It's not the most comforting thing to do. But have you found this period actually close more doors for you, or actually is it open more doors for you?
I think, to be realistic, I think the doors have been closing, because it's probably the first thing that people deprioritize when they've got issues with budget. So coaching is like, oh no, we can't do that because, and the more forward-thinking organizations and leaders are seeing the opportunity. But so it's closed doors but opened others, I would say.
Yeah, and what my biggest fear of the whole thing is whether people, we were talking about this off air earlier, are experiencing diversity fatigue in this situation, and it's like I listen to a show about football a lot. They keep talking about the fact that they probably shouldn't be talking about football while people are dying, and I know,
fair point.
And I know it's not the and I'm trying to be careful not to compare apples with oranges here, but when you're talking to business leaders, it's kind of like, look, diversity inclusion is very important for us because that's the work that we're engaged into and we understand all the impacts and effects. But as a leader of a business, for instance, it's often been said you're worried about the next pound and how do you pay the bills and keep people on. It's whether that slides down the pecking order. So I'm curious, from the engagements that you've had, do you find that people are experiencing a little bit of diversity fatigue?
Yeah, and I think it's not just relevant to now. I think it's been around for a little while, which is why I'm really keen to change the narrative around it, so that it's not just the conversation that says, why isn't diversity and inclusion changing things fast enough? It's about perhaps redirecting that conversation to be, how can diversity and inclusion really benefit you as a leader, your priorities? So, whether that's around gaining new customers or understanding customer needs, it's about changing the narrative to be much more aligned and in sync with leaders and what keeps them awake at night and what they're focusing on. I think that's where the opportunity exists. And maybe that's something about how we also talk to leaders around how inclusion can benefit and help them as they move through this COVID journey from, some lockdown now to reopen and to future new world, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, and whilst there's these services out there that can help either in this situation through transition and certainly in a new world, It'd be interesting for people to sort of learn more about that. In that respect, then, can you talk a little bit about your process? How do you work in your coaches with, as to what that might look like? If I was to come on, tap you on the shoulder and say, be interested in your services, what would that process look like?
It's down to each individual, but generally speaking, what tends to happen is I would ensure through a chemistry conversation on a one-to-one basis that we are a good fit for each other. It's a partnership. It's not a one-way thing. It's a partnership. So it needs to work for both sides. That is where you start to get a feel for an individual, and you start to work out what is keeping them up at night, what's on their mind. And then you make sure that the level of trust is starting to develop. You can't have coaching without trust. And so a lot of it is about building the right relationship between the two of you. So once the coaching chemistry session has happened, you then start to look at, the number of sessions you might need, and the kind of two-way contract you need to do in terms of what do I need from you, what do you need from me. It's really important to get that out to help to build the trust and the honesty and openness, if you like. So all that contracting up front is absolutely vital to make the coaching successful for the client as possible. It's their conversation. I'm there to shine the light and to perhaps point out things that may be blocking them, but they're unconscious of them. So that's the kind of process it follows. And obviously then you have an opportunity to agree coaching goals, and then you come back and revisit them to make sure that that the coaching's actually helped achieve them.
It's fairly extensive, isn't it? So, what does success look like for you with the individuals that you're coaching? Then, is it the light bulb moment? Is it something that they end up doing? How does that look for you, and how does that make you feel?
It's the raising the awareness. So, if I see light bulbs or breakthrough moments, that is the stuff that I really do feel fulfilled around. Because if I can help to shine that light, then that's, for me, that's progress. Whether or not at the end of 6 sessions that they've actually started doing things differently is a different thing, and that's down for them to determine. But for me, if they are perhaps benefiting from a different approach or thinking about things they wouldn't have thought of before, and unearthing those nuggets that have been hidden inside you for however many years, that to me is progress.
It's digging to that uniqueness of those individuals that you talk about.
The uniqueness and digging into it. Yeah, completely, always.
Brilliant. Segueing into a little bit about the City Women's Network, can you tell me a little bit more about what they do, what's its purpose, and how did you come about to be involved?
Okay, so the City Women's Network is a wonderful network that was established in the 1970s, I think, and their mission is to enable members to engage with their authentic selves and to bring their purpose to life through connectivity, collaboration, sharing, learning, and trusting relationships. And I think an important point, having fun at the end of it. So I love that mission because it captures the essence of what that network's all about. And I got involved purely through, as is mostly the case nowadays, as you'll probably find, man, is through a network connections. So somebody I spoke to who was a fellow coach recommended I talk to the VP of the network, and we started talking about inclusion and my role in it in the past and my feelings and my passions around the subject. And she said, we'd love you to apply for this inclusion role on the board. And I thought about it and thought, yeah, okay, great, but no, I haven't got the time and that's not right for me. And interestingly enough, sometimes you don't always see what's the best for you at the time. It's a bit like coaching, to be honest, is when you sort of recognize your sort of subconscious thoughts around something. So I said no, and she said, you need to rethink because I think this is exactly what you need. so within half an hour, I'd sort of decided, yes, okay, I'm going for it.
Brilliant.
It's been a great journey since. I've not regretted that decision at all. A wonderful set of like-minded individuals, all working together voluntarily to help bring these members together and to help forward learning, which is fantastic. So the network is one to look at and to think about, because it is a way of sharing your thinking and your I suppose your expertise with each other, I guess.
Brilliant. So you've gained a larger network, some more interesting individuals to sort of engage with, I guess. And then has that then provided you with a larger platform in the work that you do, and more interest in the work that you do as well?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic way of validating as well, because you've got a wonderful group of people there that are all very focused on, driving a greater inclusion. So it really does bleed over into my coaching work, and that's really necessary and really important, because one supports the other. And I'm finding myself having conversations from a slightly different perspective on the same subject, which is enormously valuable, and is helping my thinking at the same time.
And membership wise, so they're individuals and also organizations and corporates, right?
Organizations and corporates, yeah. We have a number of corporate members, and we have a larger number of individual members. And we offer now, thanks to the COVID, I suppose, catalyst, if you like, we offer all of that online, which has been remarkably successful, to be honest. It's more, I love your word, keep going back to it, accessible, because it's online, and because it's much easier, isn't it, just to look at Zoom and find the right session and dial into it than it is having to get on the tube and then go and find the venue. So it's offered a space which perhaps wouldn't have been open to as many people in the past.
And you'd obviously encourage people to look into this and come on board and join as a member.
Yeah, have a look, and if have a look and see what's going on, see some of the events. You can actually attend the events. I think that we're offering people to attend, but with a nominal contribution to a charity. We have a charitable partner called Wellbeing of Women. So for a nominal donation, you can come and experience and see just what sorts of events are being put on by the network.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think. I often refer people to you to go. There might be interesting individuals for the City Women's Network, because I'm fascinated with the work that you guys do, and I think it does some tremendous things with great impact, and I love how diverse the community is. It's different types of people.
Thank you for doing that, man, because I've noticed an uptick in number of people wanting to find out more, noticeable. So clearly it's filling a gap for people at the moment wanting to create communities or be part of a community that perhaps they've lost a little bit of since they've been working from home.
I think more than ever, right? In this situation, even before COVID, there's a lot of people who are either in senior management roles or just starting out or got their own business, whatever it might be. Will be going through something and often feel like there is no support. I'm kind of doing this on my own. I need a bit of help. And having community of, in this case, women who are in similar situations but have a different perspective, different experiences, can be so beneficial and fruitful. And that's why I'm always eager and keen to go linking with the likes of yourself, so that they can harness some of that.
Wonderfully unique individuals, man.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely. I need to write that
down. You're wonderfully unique, man.
I hope I inspired that from you.
Absolutely.
I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going to segue into to drawing us to a bit of a close. So what's the future look like for you once we get out this, guys, and lockdown? How are you looking to ramp up things for coach inclusion and the work that you're doing for the City Women's Network?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one again I'm still deliberating on, but I'm finding increasingly, and thanks to a wonderful ICF conference last week when I attended a number of wonderful speakers, one of the things I took away from that conference, coaching conference, was the importance of collaboration. For not only just finding your niche as a coach, but also collaborating with others. So I think there's enormous power in connection and joining forces and supporting each other. So if I come across somebody that I can't potentially support or don't feel that I'm the right person to support from a coaching side, but I offer that person to somebody else, so I think it's better placed to serve them. So I think it's that mindset. It's shifting into a not a me, it's to an us mindset around coaching. And the other piece is around coaching professionalism. So you probably know, man, that there's so many coaches out there at the moment, so many. And I think it's about making sure that we are disciplined in how we present ourselves as coaches, the whole profession of coaching, very important to underline. We've got to make sure that people see this as a credible profession, hence the reason why it's so important to have qualification, credentialing and things like that, to ensure that it's perceived and seen in the right way, which I think sometimes has been a problem for coaching in the past.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because like any profession, there are in my mind, there's always good and then there's bad in any job that you do, right? And but it's much easier for the bad to affect the perspective of the good. So in that mindset, it's really important so that people understand and can gravitate to very impactful, useful resources that are in the work that you're trying to do, that you can provide fair access to as well, and not allow other people's sort of less well-natured kind of services affect that. And I think the collaboration piece is so important. We touched upon it earlier about the organizations, and one question I always wanted to ask was, how can the X community help? And I think it's about that engagement, really, because what we look to do in the end is, because we're speaking to so many different types of organizations that have different services and products that they want to offer in the market, but it's always about diversity and inclusion underpinning it. It's try and connect all these individuals together. I mean, to your point earlier, you're not a therapist, right? But you might come into a situation with individuals that require some of that. So it'd be good to get that connection made so you can support each other, really. So
ethical as well. It's the right thing ethically to do, because we cannot be offering coaching if we don't feel not qualified to do so. So it kind of hits right up against the ethical requirements of the profession, really, which is something that we all strongly adhere to. So that's another point. I think Candidate X is a great point, because Candidate X and what you believe in, and I'm looking at your website now and what you stand for, which is fabulous. Believes in a world where everyone can be their true selves within the workplace, where every voice is heard. Wonderful, so resonant with what I'm doing, and where everybody feels a true sense of belonging. So I suppose it's a lovely alignment between Coach Inclusion and Candidate X. I think that what you have that would be really helpful is the community, the power of community that you're establishing as a means of moving forwards. That is something I think that I personally believe my business could really leverage, as well as the fact that we're so aligned in terms of our purpose as well.
Absolutely. Coaching is something that's come on the radar more prominently throughout the last sort of few years and whatnot. But inclusion and the idea of coaching, to get that established at all ages, is really important, because if you can imprint that from an early age throughout your career. If I knew about this sort of things back in my 20s, I think what I've been able to achieve with my teams and other individuals would have been magnified.
Yes, yeah, and I see that when I was working inside organisations, the lead as a coach is critical, and the number of courses I used to run with them and with externals is achieving real light bulbs. Coach leaders going, my goodness, this is so simple, but I don't do it.
Yeah.
So I think so much opportunity to focus on that, and maybe demystify coaching, because coaching is seen, as I said before, to be an elite service that's provided when you get up to the heady heights of senior management. But maybe we are branding it in the wrong way. It doesn't necessarily need to lose its credibility at all, but we need to make it more accessible and available to people that wouldn't normally have it.
Brilliant. And a bit of an open call to anybody listening then that's interested in these services to get in touch, because
Absolutely.
I think there's some tremendous rewards and benefits from that experience. And I'm speaking from that who's very close to, obviously married to even the person that's experienced this. So through working with you, and Trina's remarked on how helpful that's been, which is brilliant. But before I let you go, because I know you've got a coaching call to get onto, I want to talk to you about your singing very quickly that you mentioned right at the beginning there. So, Dawn, you're part of the London City Voices, right? And you did a rendition. You did a rendition with your choir that not so while ago for "You've Got a Friend," the Carole King cover for charity. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is how I kind of decompress, I relax, singing. I've sung for a long time in different places, but I enjoy the weekly get-togethers. And the London City Voices is a massive choir that works across London. I think we've got 400 members now.
Oh my word, that's tremendous.
Yeah, So you can imagine lockdown that happened, and singing is off the agenda in a group anyway, because of the the risk of catching from each other. Singing, because of the way in which it works, you're breathing, you're singing loudly, it doesn't lend itself to being socially distanced necessarily. So we decided, in fact, it was not my idea, but the musical director decided that we could do something valuable here and make some money for a charity. So we all got together in our independent houses and basically recorded our own selves singing our voice parts. So I'm an alto too in the choir, and I had to sing and record myself as well. So it was a visual and auditory treat for everybody. And then Richard, our musical director, pulled it all together, which apparently is extremely time consuming, and I wouldn't even pretend to guess what he did. But then he produced this wonderful song with all of us singing in harmony, and there must have been something like 280 people who did that recording, and we put it out there. It was on the news actually recently, and it actually has made over £50,000 for the Women's Aid charity, which is a charity to support victims of domestic abuse, which, as you can imagine, has increased rapidly at this time. So that was what we did probably about a month ago now, which was wonderful experience.
And you're still taking donations, right?
Donations, yep. So you can look at London City Voices, put in anywhere. Look on YouTube, you can see all the wonderful stuff we've done, and then you'll be able to see how to donate to it if you'd like to as well.
A tremendous achievement. I mean, £50,000 when so much about finances is in the air and the media all the time. People, it just shows how generous people are and how aware people are about people's circumstances, particularly those that are vulnerable during this pandemic. And great effort from you guys. 200 people to do something virtual must have been such a crazy good experience, wonderful experience, and you guys deserve an immense amount of credit. It took me at least 10-15 minutes to try and find you on the video screen, actually.
Right, okay, yeah. There's so many of us, the whole experience of recording yourself singing when you don't normally sing alone was also quite challenging. But again, this is all about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, and I had the time to do it, so why wouldn't I, if it's also in the spirit of supporting such a good charity?
Absolutely. I will be sure to include the links to the donation and also the video on our program notes. Everybody needs to get on this and enjoy it. It was brilliant. I very much enjoyed it. I love Carole King, so it was a great little rendition. So well done to you guys. Dawn, I want to say a big thanks to you for joining me today. It's been really a lot of fun chatting as usual. But getting to know a little bit more about your career and what you're looking to do and achieve, and we wish you all the best of luck with it all. Yeah, and thanks as well, man, for having me and for the useful reflections and stuff that I've also learned today. So thank you so much. You're most welcome. So thank you to everybody for listening. Be good, be kind, and everyone stay safe.